That's Any of the youth that participate live outside of Cottonwood Heights? Where do they come in from for this football program?
That's a good question, but I don't know that. So to play, actually, I do know that because to play in the Brighton boundary, for which this would be, they have to, it's boundary driven. You can't live in Brighton boundary and then go play Little League football for Alta. So these would be Brighton residents.
Yes,
So
no,
they would be Cottonwood Heights. Yeah.
And what are the
Brighton.
ages of the youth?
So
From
this,
7 to 14.
yeah, this is Sean's wheelhouse. He's
Yeah.
been doing as a football
Yeah.
official for these kids for
Oh, yeah.
forever. So yeah. Anyway, good questions, Councilmember Brown. Good questions. Any other questions?
Well, the issue that we've had in the past when is making donations without having some sort of a 501c3 or some stated benefit to the city. Have we done?
We have addressed that. Shane has looked into that and evaluated it, and based on it going through a budget process with a hearing, if the council decides to fund that, then that is the process that we need to go through, and that's why it is a budget amendment tonight.
Good question, though, Scott.
No, that's something that we've dealt with a number of times in the past is just not being able. So if it goes through a public hearing,
Budget amendment process.
all right.
Okay, great. So we'll have a public hearing on that. That's been noticed to the public. Moving to a public comment period, separate from a public hearing. We have two items for the public. Anybody willing to comment tonight? The first item is item 5.1. And the council will receive public on the proposed sensitive lands evaluation and development standards SLEDS ordinance update that we've been going through. So this is the chance for the public to come. Everything, as far as I understand, Mike, is updated on the website.
Yeah, so the updates have been published. The major changes are those that we've spent the last few work sessions talking through. So I can give an introduction. I don't need to. It's all the same stuff we've discussed.
Okay.
And Mayor, we are planning, if it's okay with you and the council, to have another opportunity August 15th. So we're not just saying this is the only opportunity. We'll have another time for comment.
So we wouldn't vote until September.
Probably not till September.
It's a 96-page document, and I got it on the website mid to late last week. So
Okay.
seems good to give.
I think that's a good idea.
That.
I think that's a really good idea. I don't think there'd be any objection to that. So great. So we'll have that comment, our public comment period. We'll have a second public comment period. And this will be for the council to receive public on the proposed rezone of the 3.049 acres of realty located at 6851 South Big Cottonwood Canyon Road. We discussed this in a previous session. I think our last meeting. Mike, do you want to?
We did. We introduced that,
well?
and I'll show a few slides in the business meeting, but it's the cul-de-sac area on that larger 15-acre parcel. The current land use is mixed use. They're proposing to amend that to residential low density. Current zoning is like foothill recreation or foothill residential. It's kind of a holdover zone from when the city incorporated.
Yeah.
They're proposing to amend that to R18. The Planning Commission held its public hearing, I think on July 19th. People showed up to share public comment, but all were in support of the change, and the Planning Commission recommended approval unanimously.
Okay.
Has the subdivision actually occurred?
No, but we are recommending that the rezone not take effect until the subdivision occurs, and that review has happened. It's all approved. It just needs to be recorded and executed.
Is that up for action tonight, or is that going on?
It is,
next?
Yeah.
Does that need to be in the motion, or is that in the verbiage with the?
Probably might be good to just note that in the motion to approve.
Once the subdivision is complete and approved?
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
So you can see from our action item, well, the first one that we'll have, the first item we'll be voting on will actually be the budget amendment that we just talked about. So that's item 6.1. It'll be ordinance 399. And then I want you to pay close attention here. So then items 6.2 and 6.3 are related, but so the rezone, before we can rezone, we have to actually amend the general plan. And so the first vote, so I will basically, Shane, tell me if this needs to be worded any different. I will both basically read in consideration of ordinance 400-A and then 400-D and read specific to what they both are. We'll begin with the vote on 400-A. If that passes, we won't have to move on to 400-D. That's okay procedure wise?
May I ask a question of our council? My understanding of all of our general plans in our city is that they are non-binding. So could you briefly explain to me why we need to amend the general plan if it is considered legally non-binding?
Well, a general plan is a forward-looking document, and so it's possible to have a general plan amendment that look forward, but not necessarily rezone the property to comport with the general plan use if the zoning is already there. But if the general plan is amended, the use to be able to go into one of the zones by the zoning has to be something that's contemplated by that plan designation, land use designation.
So is zoning treated differently than it is treated differently than
Yeah,
some?
both types of land use, but the general plan is a more a broader brush and a more forward-looking document than the zoning. The zoning determines what can be done with the property at this particular time, but the zoning to be effective, it has to comport with the general plan.
Because rezoning is a future action, you're in a general plan is a forward-looking document. You want them to align.
Yeah, we've always made sure that when we've done a zone that's come up that's different than what the general plan does, we've done it this way, where we've done the general plan amendment and then the zone. I don't think we've ever just changed the zone that's in conflict with the general plan. That would just kind of seems
right.
I don't know, tacky. I don't know.
That would
Procedurally, you probably could. I think that's not a bad question. Councilmember Brown, right? Anyway.
No, procedurally, you can't rezone to something that isn't contemplated
You
by
can,
the
okay,
underlying general
Okay.
land use
got it.
designation.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. I think that was a good question. Okay. And then, so that's item 6.2 that we'll consider first, and then we'll basically do the same thing with item 6.3, which is we'll explain ordinance 401-A, which would be the approval of the rezone. We'll explain ordinance 401-D, the denying the rezone, and then we'll begin with voting on ordinance 401-A, which then would make obsolete 401-D.
Mayor, basically, someone on the council would just make a motion to either approve A or D.
Okay.
So.
Okay, perfect.
And if the land use designation, the first one is denied, why then the zoning has to be denied as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that, Shannon. Okay, and then item 6.4 is a consideration of resolution 2023-43, approving and accepting a grant from the Utah State Historic Preservation Office. Tim, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, this is something that we've approved in the past multiple times. We wrote a grant to get a certified local government grant to do reconnaissance survey on historic properties. The grant is for up to $11,225. We have to match that. You had approved a contract with an individual that's done that for us after a procurement process. So we're recommending approval of this CLG grant acceptance.
That's in our current budget.
It is. It's in our current budget through the historic committee.
Questions, comments? Sound good? Okay, and then the last item for tonight will be just approval of the consent calendar, which is the minutes for our previous work session, CDRA meeting and city council meeting on July 11th and 18th. Remember, we didn't get those completed in time with the week notice. Okay, thank you. Item 3. So one of the organizations that with which our city works closely is the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and we are honored today to have the executive director, Mr. Andrew Gruber, Mr. Wayne Benyon. Who, Wayne, you are the, let me just make sure I get this correct. You are the Director of Short Range Planning, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and then we also have Megan Townsend here, who is the Community and Economic Development Director for WFRC. So that big long name, yeah,
I'm joining us. Thank you.
the Wasatch Front Regional Council will now be
And Megan is a senior.
referenced as WFRC. So thank you guys for being here. We appreciate it. And I'm going to give, thank you. Do you need to come on with me to do that? Thank you.
Yes.
And I'm going to give Councilmember Burrell just a second to give a little bit of a background into why we've asked Andrew and that group to be here today. Go ahead, Ellen.
Thank you very much. I think many people, everyone at this table certainly knows that I think all of us along the Wasatch Front are really excited about the new U.S. Department of Transportation's Safe Systems approach and their SS4A, which is Safe Streets and Roads for All. So this is all about safe mobility for all users. And so in that stead, we know that some municipalities across the United States were able to apply by early July of this year to get funding for various active transportation projects that they're doing within their municipality. But for most cities in Utah, I think it's fair to say, each city hasn't put together such a plan, safety action plan. And so with the great foresight of WFRC, they applied last year to get the monies, and I shouldn't say too much, but to be able to put together a template that will make it far easier for cities along the Wasatch Front to build their own safety action plan and be eligible for the funds that are now flowing out of the U.S. government for, again, safe mobility for all users. This could be crosswalks, this could be sidewalks and bike lanes and all kind of, to intersections and dangerous roads. And it's just really exciting because in the grant processes that I've come to understand, there have been grants for some time, but sometimes there's strings attached, like our city manager helped me to understand that the reason why Danish Road hasn't been approved yet for funding with grant support is because it doesn't have a certain regional priority. So we're excited to think that the federal government sees that within each city, we need to have safe mobility for all users, not just for regional roads and such, or with that focus, I should say. So at any rate, I've been rather vocal about wanting to make sure that our city is as prepared as we can be. I know Matt Shipp's department, Public Works, is in the throes of our second draft for a master transportation plan. And so we're thrilled to have all three from WFRC here to help us to understand what this safety action plan is. And we'll get a glimpse. And I'm really excited to know that this is just the beginning of an ongoing conversation, right, over the months ahead, and how each city, especially obviously in Cotton Heights, what we can and should be doing in these months prior to 2024, when hopefully we have a template that we can implement here. So thank you for letting me say a few words. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mayor, Council Member Burrell, thank you. We really appreciate your leadership on this really important issue, not only for your community, but for the region. So thank you. And Mayor and members of the council, Tim, thanks so much for having us here in Cottonwood Heights. We always love being in your fine city. I'm used to seeing the mayor at WFRC meetings or COG meetings, and Sean at the Capitol, and Matt, in either Capitol. Congratulations, by the way, but it's really great to be with all of you here today, and we appreciate the invitation. As you noted, Mayor and Council Member, what you asked us to focus on is the Safe Streets for All opportunity, and we will focus on that. And Wayne has a presentation that he's going to go through. When we talked with Tim about joining you here, we thought it might make sense to spend just a few minutes to start by giving you a little bit of an overview of what is WFRC again. I wouldn't quiz you because I'll bet I'd get different answers from everybody. So we just give you a little bit of a quick overview on what WFRC does. Then we'll go into some detail about the Safe Streets for All program and the work that is to come and how we can all work together and be engaged. And then if we have a few minutes at the tail end of that, what we'd love to do is give Megan a moment to share some of what we've been doing together with you on not just on transportation issues, but on community development, because you've already done great things. You've got great things in store for your community to serve your residents even better. And so those would be the three elements we'd like to cover. That sound all right?
Love it. Thank
Okay,
you.
cool. Interrupt at any point with comments or questions. But again, starting out just a few minutes, what's WFRC? The Wasatch Front Regional Council is a public agency. Our jurisdiction covers Salt Lake County, Davis County, Weber County, Southern, Box Elder, Morgan, and Tooele. We have a sister agency in Utah County. Our role is we are a metropolitan planning organization, an MPO. And what that means is that we bring people together across the entirety of our metropolitan region. So think the whole Wasatch Front to plan for the future growth that our region is experiencing. Most particularly in the transportation space. But as you know, in your community, you don't do transportation in isolation. You think about transportation and housing and job creation and parks and public spaces and how all of these things interact together. We have an official role in our organization of developing the long-range transportation plans for the region. So we work with UDOT and UTA, the cities and the counties, and the plans that we develop with all of your engagement become actually the official transportation plans for the region. They all roll up into what we call the Utah Unified Transportation Plan. So that's our job. Now, we like to think that our role is to help give voice to the local communities in this broader transportation planning process. Our board is made up of principally of local elected officials, mayors, county council officials, some state legislators, and some other stakeholders, UDOT and UTA, that come together to develop these plans. Having said that, we would never presume to tell you or to try to tell you what to do in your community. You know your community. Your job is to know your community better than anybody else does. Our role, as we see it, is to provide a regional forum for discussion, because you know that as you work on your issues in your community, the issues in transportation or air quality or economic development or whatever they may be, they don't stop at the boundaries of Cottonwood Heights. So you think beyond just the county boundaries. We also take a long time horizon. We look out not just a few years, but actually decades into the future in planning to make sure that this wonderful quality of life, this unparalleled quality of life that our residents can enjoy in Utah and in Cottonwood Heights, that is preserved and even enhanced for generations to come. So we're thinking regionally, we're thinking long-term, we're thinking holistically, but we are not trying to tell any community what to do. We want to support you and partner with you as you work with your residents to figure out what's the future of your community. How can we help you? So we try to incorporate your priorities into the official transportation plans. And we are able, I'm happy to say, to provide funding to you for transportation projects. Wayne can actually highlight a few things that we've funded in your community or that are coming to be funded in your community. And then also provide technical assistance. And that's something that Meg will talk a little bit about helping with your, be it your trail planning or your for your town center or whatever the case may be. We love the opportunity that we have to partner with you and to help you accomplish your goals within a broader regional context.
Awesome.
Okay.
Just a little bit of a big scope, right?
Yeah, and lots of partners involved in that work. And to that point, we work really closely with as the mayor knows, we work really closely with the League of Cities and Towns on all sorts of things, including legislative issues. We're, arm in arm at the Capitol. As Matt knows, we work on federal issues and federal transportation policy and growth policy. And so we're just teaming with all of you on all sorts of issues all the time. Anybody want to add anything to the overview? Good, Tim, did I cover it? Yeah, okay. Transition to safety, okay? Wayne, can I offer one brief comment for just a moment? I'm going to echo Councilmember Burrell. Safety is safety in transportation, roadway, biking, walking is absolutely critical. Perhaps that's an obvious thing to say, but we have seen regionally and statewide accidents and unfortunately fatalities in transportation grow over the past several years. It's gone up. And so having transportation safety is really important for the obvious reason of directly preventing injuries as much as we can. But it's also really important for making your residents feel comfortable to do something other than driving. And with the growth that we have in our region, we can't meet the travel demands just by people driving, right? People have to feel comfortable getting out of their cars, walking, biking. And if they don't feel like there is a safe system for them to use, then they're not going to do it. And I think I understand, right, that in surveys of your residents, many of your residents, just like all over the region, have said one of the things that's most important to them is being able to get outside, to walk, to have community amenities and park space, et cetera. People have to feel comfortable and safe being able to get out and do those things. And so much of that gets at the design of our transportation system. Leads to the way the system is designed leads to the safety outcomes. So this federal program that was created, the Safe Streets for All, creates this opportunity for, as you said, council member, for Cottonwood Heights and other communities to get grants to do projects in your community to help improve transportation safety. But first, there has to be a safety action plan. And that's what we are working to develop in concert with stakeholders, including your community, but for the whole region. And once that's in place, then you would be able to seek direct federal grants for safety projects. So that's what we're here to talk about that process of developing that plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wayne.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Probably just user error. There's an on-off, right?
Andrew, I'm guessing that's through DOT. These grants.
Yeah, it's US DOT
Okay.
grant program authorized by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act.
And then
That's right.
how much is allocated specifically to this federally? And it's not a block grant, obviously. It's
So I'll cover that.
okay.
Coming.
Thanks. And
Do not
No,
steal
it's
Wayne's
working.
thunder. Yeah.
Sorry, I was helping fill time. Okay, I tried to.
And
solve
Matt's always
quicker.
ahead of always a little bit ahead of us and most people, right, Matt?
you're good. So,
You can also tap the space bar or something to move forward.
sure.
Or something. There you go.
So I'm going to give you a bit of background and then give an overview of the plan development. And feel free to interrupt with questions. So, like has been mentioned, WFRC has been asked to develop this regional safety action plan. And you see here, the purpose of the plan, as Andrew alluded to, is to provide means to local governments so that they can make strategic roadway safety improvements. And also has been mentioned, there's $1 billion a year. There are 2 of the years, as Councilmember Burrell alluded to, have been already, the funding has been distributed or is in the process of being distributed, but there are 3 years left of the program at $1 billion authorized. Don't know, for certain if it'll all become available, but $1 billion a year authorized. And as also mentioned, the intent of the program is to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. So a focus particularly on those two categories of safety challenges.
And that's roadway deaths. That could be a pedestrian, someone on a scooter. It's not just motorist death.
Correct. Yeah, the funding is eligible for roadway improvements, but that includes all modes of transportation within the roadway, whether it's pedestrians or cyclists or users of transit. This funding, the states are not eligible for this funding. It's primarily for local governments. So that's a wonderful aspect of this Safe Streets for All, or SS4A funding. And there's two types of grants: planning and demonstration grants and implementation grants. Like Andrew mentioned, there has to be a safety action plan in place before an entity can apply for an implementation grant for actual physical construction. And so, realizing this, several local governments over a year ago asked WFRC if they would lead the development of a regional safety action plan, which will allow all the governments, local governments in the regional, within the WFRC region to be eligible, because we're going to make sure that we meet there's a checklist of what has to be in your safety action plan in order for you to be eligible to apply. But that will make local governments eligible for the next funding cycle, which we anticipate the deadline for those applications to be in July of 24. We'll see if that changes a bit, but regardless, that's a primary purpose of this plan effort, is to make local governments eligible to apply for these SS4A grants. And it will also help you identify, regardless of funding source, safety improvements that you can make within your community. Applying, using local funds, applying to county, state, whomever, other federal programs to make a difference in implementing safety improvements.
May I ask one question? You mentioned the two types of grants, the planning and demonstration grants.
Yeah.
And there was, what was the other one? The
Implementation.
implementation. So would something like a transit improvement application, say you wanted to do something as a demonstration project and it fell in the realm of transit improvement?
Yeah.
Could a municipality, as far as you know, apply for instance, a transit improvement under the planning and demo grant category, even apply for several of those, and then also apply for the other, implementation grants?
Yeah, and so the only key would be the type of transit improvement, whether it's within the roadway. If it's a transit improvement that's directly tied to safety within a roadway, then yes.
So it couldn't necessarily be to alleviate traffic. It would have to show that it has a safety component.
Correct, a direct safety component. So something on rail maybe might not be as likely to be.
Since we don't have any rail in Cottonwood Heights, I'm actually thinking something.
Yes. Anyway, so there's a lot of information on the Safe Streets for All website, with a lot more detail on eligibility and guidelines for those two types of grants. So working with several local governments across the region, WFRC submitted an application, and with consultant help, submitted an application, received a grant with the local match that's mostly coming from the regional council. There's about $1 million that we're using with a consultant effort and a collaborative local government effort that I'll get into more over the next several months to develop a comprehensive safety action plan for the WFRC region. And so we'll move to an overview of that. So again, the purpose, three main components of this safety action plan. First will be to analyze safety needs, data collection for that effort, data gathering, I should say, has already begun. And then a second component, in addition to assembling that data, will be to identify high-risk locations as well as factors, whether they be roadway attributes or other factors contributing, especially to fatalities and serious injuries. And then the third substantive element is to prioritize strategies to address those high-risk locations and address those factors that have contributed to crashes.
May I ask another question? So
Please.
is that normally, is any given municipality relying on their police department records of various crashes and injuries to come up with where, for instance, the high-risk locations?
You bet. So yeah, that's a main component of the safety analysis will be to review. There's a statewide and a region-wide, of course, database with all roadway crashes identified.
Including those with pedestrians and cyclists?
Yes, definitely. Yep. And so that's a key element. Another key element of data is the roadway attribute data, and there's actually a lot of data available on those risk factors as well. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You bet.
That data, by the way, is something you can view now.
Yeah.
You can be looking at that.
That data existed before. correct?
Yeah,
I
That's
mean,
correct.
we knew where accidents had to be reported and okay.
Correct. Yep. So this just outlines the study area, which is the entire Association of Governments area for WFRC, plus the Metropolitan Planning Organization area in Southern Box Elder. And I'll just note this data analysis is going to be focused on locally owned roads, since the SS4A grants are available for local governments. That's going to be the focus. However, we will also be looking at data on state roads. And so if a local government is interested in or sees a high priority need on a state road within their community, that's also going to be an option if the state is willing to work with you on a state road improvement. Maybe I didn't entirely make clear, but there's been a planning team that's been involved from local governments across the region. And that a subset of that planning team that helped select the consultant is going to continue as a steering team. Matt, with your city here, Matt Ship is a member of that steering team, as well as other representatives from local governments across the region. Rather than just have a single planning team going forward, we're transitioning to having 11 different safety planning teams. And those will be, I'll get into opportunities for engagement, but and details on that, but we're transitioning to 11 different geographic focus areas across the region. And we'll talk about that. So here's a list of the steering team members, and then a list of those geographic focus areas.
And it's just the idea of having 11 geographic areas is so that we can work with more specificity. So Matt doesn't have to focus on what's going on in Southern Box Elder County, for example. You can focus on what's going on in this area so that we can be more precise. If this is going to have meaning, it has to have a higher level of precision about actual data and needs in your community.
Correct, thank you. And so you can see here that with one of those GFAs, one of those geographic focus areas is East Salt Lake Valley. And you can see the cities included in that area. And I'll talk in a minute about who we want to have involved or invited to participate in each of these GFA planning teams. But so I don't forget, I want to ask if probably received an invite to a kickoff or a safety launch.
Yes,
Yes, to kick this effort off for developing the safety action plan. We would really appreciate your assistance in identifying a law enforcement officer to participate in the geographic focus area team. And so I'll just make it mention of that before I forget. And if you wouldn't mind forwarding us the contact information, we'll make sure they're invited and able to participate in these GFA planning teams. Or in the one for East Salt Lake Valley.
Paul's not here, but he doesn't have much going on, right?
No.
No, I'll handle it.
Let's see here. Reaction to the space bar. So. Thank you. So for these geographic focus area planning teams, we hope to invite not only elected officials and staff from each of the jurisdictions within that geographic focus area, but also UDOT, ETA, emergency responders, county health departments, law enforcement, numerous stakeholders, so that there can be, as Andrew mentioned, specific knowledge and familiarity in helping review. There will be 2 rounds of these safety planning team or GFA meetings. One will be reviewing the data analysis, and that'll probably happen sometime this fall. And then a second round of these meetings will be to review proposed or recommended strategies and project types for making actual safety improvements. And you can see here, we're anxious to have as much engagement as possible. There's the safety launch on August 22nd, a 1-hour virtual meeting that'll describe a bit about the safe systems approach, a bit about the need for this effort, and an overview of the plan for developing a plan. And you can see there will be an online survey, a website, these GFA meetings, and then next June we'll wrap things up with a regional safety workshop that all these GFA teams will be invited to. Importantly, by late winter, early spring, we hope to identify these recommended strategies and project types so that each community can begin to think about what they want to seek funding for. So it'll give them a few months of lead time in thinking about preparing an application for Safe Streets for All. And here are those scheduled milestones. I've already gone through most of those. And also a summary of deliverables. There's more detail to this effort that I've talked about today, but I hope I've hit on the main points. And so if you have any questions about what I've discussed.
I've got some questions. We got, Mayor, are we okay with time?
Go ahead.
Is the purpose of this to alleviate problematic, just as an example, intersections? There's multiple deaths that are happening or people are being harmed at a specific intersection. The data shows it. So some changes to reconstruct to make sure that the flow is better for pedestrians or bikes? Or is this more to implement additional bikeways, walkways, such as South Temple, what Aaron Mendenhall has done there, kind of transform some existing cities into more of a half and half formula? What is the purpose? Does that make sense?
Yeah, more of the former.
Okay.
Where, you're identifying specific types of improvements, whether it's signage or improved crossing facilities or improvements at intersections. This plan, the intent is to identify those needs and suggest some priorities as far as what are the low-hanging fruit, what types of improvements might be cost less but have a bigger impact, as well as some identifying more expensive improvements for all users, whether it's.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was a shoreline trail project of bypassing or it's something more granular. It
Well,
sounds like.
Councilmember, for the latter, there are other grant programs.
Okay,
If we know the federal system, there's a program for everything. And we have a program that we administer. It's called the TAP, the Transportation Alternatives Program, where we provide funding specifically, Matt knows this, funding specifically to increase trail projects. There's funding available for transit projects. That can come through WFRC or it can come through the state. But as Wayne is noting, this is the first time there's a program that is aimed specifically at mitigating known transportation safety problems.
got it. Understood.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I was just,
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask about thresholds, because municipalities are gonna be competing for these funds, correct?
Yeah.
And will you be aware of the thresholds of incidents and what that is, how many incidents will be required to be able to get some of this funding in certain areas? Because that's gonna be something that everybody's gonna be graded on, and if we're a city that doesn't have an awful lot, we just get bumped right to the wayside, correct?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I don't know that there's a definitive answer, because I'm, at least on the surface, the Safe SS4A program has not said there are thresholds for making improvements. I think it's more the quality and focus and the effectiveness of the types of improvements that you want to do. And so there will be, I am aware there's a minimum dollar threshold for some of these implementation grants. And so it might be a number of safety improvements within a single jurisdiction. It might be safety improvements that cross jurisdictions, so that you're teaming up and making more of a regional effort. But there's a lot more detail on the Safe Streets website as to criteria and how to make your application effective.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if we don't shift the data and we don't know if it's effective, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
there has to be some similar thresholds to be able to measure
Right. And
to determine that.
so part of the intent of this plan is to identify those strategies or those project types that are more effective or have a bigger impact in reducing roadway.
And increasing that competition level.
Well, if
Yeah.
I Hey, I did have a
Can I
conversation with.
please ask my question?
This is, you, in just one moment.
No,
The Federal
sorry,
Highway
excuse me.
Transportation
Excuse
Agency
me.
Told me that there was money left on
Ellen,
the table. in
you've talked
2023.
plenty. Let me ask a question.
I think it would be helpful for everyone to know that money was left on the table, and one of the federal highway transportation officials in Utah told me recently
I'll
that
just not-
they're very interested in municipalities coming forward. She said you do not have to show that somebody has died in the location, so I just wanted to add that. Sorry for 30 seconds, go ahead. Excuse me.
My question was similar to Sean's in that it seems a lot of what you do, you get all the projects together, you go through a scoring system and you rank them all. If this is running a similar type of a system where everyone's projects go through and there's X number of savings they see or whatever. Again, if we're in a safer area, we would tend to not be eligible for a lot of that funding, or we would certainly wouldn't rank us high. Is there some mechanism that there would be a certain amount allocated minimum to each of the different areas or municipalities that may not be in as grievous situation?
Excellent question again. And I'll just tell you what I know. For this SS4A program, it's a discretionary grant program, and there are criteria outlined, and I don't have time to go into all the details as to how to make your application most effective. But the intent of this plan that WFRC is leading the effort on is to identify those most effective roadway improvements for fatalities and reducing fatalities and serious injuries, and not only to make you eligible for this federal discretionary grant program, but also for other funding opportunities. The state has federal dollars, the state has state dollars. I'm aware of some of the criteria for the state, the federal dollars the state administers. And commonly there are scoring, like you've said.
Let me see if I can break it down, something that's a little more cut and dried. In the past, CMAQ funds, great program, awesome purpose,
Sure.
always went to UTA because UTA could always win because their projects always had a much better impact on CMAQ type funding requests. Quite some time ago, there was an alteration made that say that that's great that they can, and they do deserve a lot of the money, but there's also some amount that local places that may not be able to do quite as big of a bang as UTA,
Right.
but could still use funding. This out here was one of those projects.
Well, and
That's what I'm asking. Is there some breakdown where maybe if we're not?
You're right. The WFRC administered programs typically have a scoring process. This SS4A does not appear to have a scoring process per se. It does outline several criteria that you want to make sure you're addressing. And so identifying your projects and collaborating, making it a collaborative effort will probably benefit you. But as far as I'm aware, there's not a specific scoring process for this SS4A, these SS4A grants.
Could I just add, Councilman, as we go through this process, we want to help you to be successful in getting the projects that you've identified as being priorities, getting them funded. So we'll work through a lot of those details, but we want to see that communities across the region are able to make safety improvements. So we'll try to help you. That's part of the work we're going to provide.
Maybe that all the communities get a shot at it as opposed to maybe just the ones that are in the most. I understand there's certainly a need for those that are in dire straits or have significant issues getting a majority of the funding, but it would.
Yeah, I think Andrew's got a difficult job, but there's a lot of stakeholders there. And I think you do one of the best jobs, hands down. And Pete, you don't get enough credit, Andrew. You deserve more. Because I know you go back there and you fight, your team's laughing. They're saying you don't need it.
No, he deserves.
No,
this.
but I know what
They're saying you're giving him credit.
and you've got a great advocate back there with Ryan Levitt, and you guys do a great job of bringing those dollars back to us. So thank you. And I know we're short on time.
Yeah,
man.
and so knowing that we have this opportunity coming up on August 22nd, I'll save some of my questions. I have.
Yeah.
Because I thought once we got our safety action plan that we would apply directly to SS4A. Not necessarily going through WFRC,
Yeah,
having them
that's right.
prioritized by you.
That's correct. Each community will have the opportunity to compete nationwide directly to for a WFRC won't be a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
But we're happy to help you.
And to that point, this is the beginning. And what you've heard here is an overview of how the process is going to work. And we are inviting engagement from your community so that you can understand and your community can help shape the plan and the projects that are identified, and that you can be in as good a position as possible to compete for funding along with other communities. So
Awesome.
the launch is coming up. And we'll keep sending out information, and we know Matt and others, I'm sure Councilmember Burrell and others are going to be involved in this, and any and all of you are welcome to be engaged in this. Okay.
And just a note, I sent that email out
Good.
inviting all of the council. I invited Chief Russo, Mike Johnson, Matt Ship, of course, is involved. So
Yeah.
that information went out
Awesome.
today. So look at it in your email as well.
Okay.
And there's
Yeah, and
hard copies of slides and that launch
oh,
invite
wonderful.
as well.
Thank
So
you for
I'll
doing that
I'll
so
do that.
much.
I just,
Go ahead, sorry, Nancy. If
no,
I'm-
no, I was just gonna say,
I know.
Megan's got a, are we
Oh, yeah,
ready to
that's
move to
right, yeah,
Megan?
Megan.
That's, yeah.
If you have just a moment.
Yeah,
sure.
no, we want to hear from you.
Sure,
You're
okay.
here for a reason.
I'd like to just complete a little bit of the picture of how Wasatch Front Regional Council is working with you all. You got a good taste of the Safe Streets for All effort. Of course, there's our Wasatch Choice Vision effort and these regional things we do. Sometimes WFRC comes right to you. And one of the ways we do that is through our Transportation and Land Use Connection program. So we have a planning technical assistance program that is, rather than regional efforts that you plug into, it's our collective effort to implement the Wasatch Choice through your visions and plans. And so we have several of those projects going on with Cottonwood Heights because they're actually taking really great advantage of the program. It's not something that's you're not penalized year to year for having good projects. So keep on coming to the pot. This is money for planning. Anything that maximizes the value of investment that you've already made in your public infrastructure, enhances your access to opportunities, getting people from A to B jobs to home easier, increasing travel options to optimize mobility. So a lot of this active transportation planning that we've talked about, and creating communities with opportunities to live, work, and play. And Cottonwood Heights is nailing that one right now with the town center master plan that we're just embarking on. That's a transportation and land use connection project. I have the privilege of working with you and your staff on that one. We also recently funded that in the same year, which is rare. Cottonwood Heights got two this past year. One of those is the Canal Trails Master Plan. That one's just kicking off as well. And actually IHC was a partner in funding that one because they also see the great vision of Cottonwood Heights. Previously, and ongoing, the general plan effort that you're working on with those area ordinances, that's something we're collaborating with you through what we call TLC on, and the Mid-Valley Active Transportation Plan was something that Cottonwood Heights participated in. Neighboring cities. So we've talked about what the Safe Streets for All funding can accomplish, and that might be focused on, incident management and things like that, making our streets safer. These projects set you up for a lot of other pots of funding to implement things like bike lanes and your town center. And so really, I'm just applauding you for making good use of this program, but reminding you that it's out there and any planning needs come to us.
Thank you. And staff deserves a lot of credit, starting with Tim, Mike, Matt, Robbie, honestly, everybody. The staff has done a great job at being involved with Andrew and you all, and thank you, staff, for all of your efforts. But thank you, Megan. That was great. And we are excited to engage you more with the Hillside Plaza project.
Yeah.
So we are thrilled and excited. So, okay.
Thank you
Yes,
for
May I just state congratulations on a National Leadership Award for Andrew. Saw that. I wanted to recognize.
Thank you. That's
for
very
that.
nice
So,
of you. Thank you. We've got great partners, as Matt's noting, around the country and also here, and we're just thrilled to be able to help you. And we've just touched on a little bit of what WFRC does. So if it's okay, we're going to come back to your next work sessions for next 10 meetings. And just do this again, but just cover different programs every time. Is that okay? Is that all right? Okay, great. Thank you. But in all seriousness, we love helping you and working with you. And if there's anything else that we can do, most of you have our contact info, but we're happy to just reach out anytime to any of us. Okay.
And Andrew, if he doesn't answer his phone, he returns your phone call. So, which is awesome. Thank you. Thank you all, honestly, for coming.
Yeah, you bet.
That was
Thank you.
You bet. Keep up the good work.
Appreciate your help. Yep,
Okay.
thank you guys.
I'll replace all the things.
Okay, we're gonna move into our staff reports. We have 5 to go over today. We're gonna start with one of my most favorite committees, our historic committee. We're gonna get a veteran memorial update from our chair, who is Jim. Jim, hi, Jim, come on up. We're excited to have you tell us more about something that I became engaged in about a year ago, as I saw some other cities implement veterans memorials. So we're here, the historic committee's been doing a lot of work, and Jim, why don't you, we'll turn the time over to you to get that discussion started. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to give you an update on the discussions we've been having as a historic committee. Let me just launch my screen here.
Sorry, let me share.
Getting the sign in error. Okay. Okay, yeah, so the historic committee has been working on this for about a year and a half. We've heard the interest in a veterans monument, and we've been exploring that. And like I said, I appreciate the opportunity to give you an update on where we're at with things. A lot of our planning right now is pretty fluid in terms of a lot of this is still conceptual, and I appreciate this opportunity because it'd be great to get some feedback. Anything that I can take back to the committee, any questions that the city council has, we'd be happy to talk about and incorporate in our planning. So, okay. So first up, I'm going to cover the design of what.
Working either?
Okay, there we go. Members of our committee that include Don Cannon, Bruce Lubick, Jerry Christensen, and Ken Berdoya have met to kind of talk about what design could look like for a veterans monument. And this is what has been proposed to this point. What this would do is give us basically 6 surfaces that we could potentially use to honor on a monument. So this is what we're calling the veteran side. And in the middle would be some kind of language, some kind of memorial honoring armed forces. And then on the sides, we'd also be honoring our first responders, law enforcement, and firefighters. Haven't come up with language yet. That's one of the next steps I will talk about. But then flipping it over, if we can go to the next slide. The next side, we were thinking conceptually of having something about the city. So something right in the middle about our city, and then something about Big Cottonwood Canyon and Little Cottonwood Canyon, these canyons that frame our city. And in a perfect world, we've had talks about how it would be very cool if those sections that are separating were made with materials that were actually taken from the canyons themselves. So on the left-hand side, mirror material potentially from Big Cottonwood, on the right, Little Cottonwood. But that certainly is not a deal breaker. That's just an idea that's been thrown out there. So that is kind of in design what we've been talking about. As far as how big this would be, you can see from this slide, it's sitting on a pedestal, which is about, we estimate would be about 1 foot to 1.5 foot tall. And the monument itself would be somewhere probably between 4 and 5 feet tall. So we're talking about something that's about 5 feet at that eye level. As far as where this would be placed on the next slide. So this is an aerial view of City Hall area or complex. We're talking about the area that's just right out here where currently it's the area in that red box. It is plants right there. So we'd be proposing to take those out and creating kind of this monument space within there that would have both the monument and then potentially some things around the monument, possibly benches, possibly some signage that would give interpretation for the monument. So that's kind of where we're thinking about as far as a proposed location for it. And then next up, the question, how does this get paid for. Don Cannon, who most of you know, if you don't know, Don owns Cannon Mortuary, so he's kind of in this business of monuments and all of that. When he kind of started leading out on the design for it, his estimate was you're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $35,000 to $40,000 to build something like what we're proposing. Subsequently, he said that costs have gone up like they have in everything, but in that area, we could expect higher than that probably. Probably not a lot, but that's kind of what the initial thought was. So we started coming up with ideas as a committee of different ways that we could build community support to potentially help fund this memorial. And what we've sort of are envisioning now, but like I said, we're open to ideas and certainly modifying this however it makes sense. What we are kind of proposing is a tiered system that would be inclusive enough to allow people at different levels of support to participate in getting this erected. So sponsorship at tier 1 would be considered sort of the highest level, and you know, some concepts there. It would be having an interpretive sign near the Veterans Memorial that could potentially have names or branding on it, benches around it that could also potentially be, purchased with and have a name affixed to them. This would be considered the highest level of sponsorship. Our next level down, if it was allowable, and we would need to kind of research this, but in the monument, around the monument itself, if we could actually put in bricks that could be personalized, that could be another way that we could sort of roll out a way for people to participate, buy a sponsorship brick and have it put around the monument. And then tier 3 would be really what we want to be sort of the most inclusive level. So we're thinking maybe one idea, create some kind of permanent website on the city's web domain that would include some interpretive information about the monument, and then be able to list people's names so that they have a place where they can point to and say, I helped with this. One thing that the committee feels pretty strongly about is the memorial itself should be pretty general in terms of not actually having the ability for people to pay to put their family members' names on the monument. You'll run out of space. Other cities, other places have done that, and it kind of goes against the spirit of inclusiveness for all who have served that we're really trying to embrace with what we're proposing here. And then if we can go to the next slide. So this is kind of where we're at and what our next steps would be. Right now, we're working with Anne to get a cost quote on really what it would look like in a true dollars and cents amount, not just a vague, a general cost quote. And so we want to get pretty specific with that. And then that will really be sort of our North Star that will guide the rest of the planning. If we know what we're aiming for, then we can start to put together this really in-depth sponsorship plan. Our committee members are actively working on developing language that would go up on those sides so that we can flesh this out a little bit more, what would actually be on the memorial itself. And then with a sponsorship plan developed, we could really dig into an outreach and community engagement plan that would help us get the word out to potential donors and community members who would like to participate in helping fund this. And really we're all in agreement. It would be very great to sort of plan towards unveiling this at some sort of future date, either Memorial Day in May or a Veterans Day upcoming in November. And so that's where we're at with our planning right now. I'm happy to answer any questions or yes.
How tall are those stones?
5 feet.
Between 4 and 5 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, this concept kind of came about from my attending a Gold Star families that a couple other cities had done. Are we, I love the concept of Gold Star families, basically families within Cottonwood Heights that have lost loved ones in the military. Would we be able to still incorporate that same concept, even though, that we're honoring families who have lost loved ones within Cottonwood Heights, I think is a cool thing to do.
Okay.
To somehow, maybe even put some names of those. It wouldn't be exhaustive there, but, and it may be under the armed forces. So anyway, something that was what my thought was.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
May I make an interjection? I serve as a liaison with the Historic Council, and I want to say Jim Kitch is amazing, not only chairing the meeting, but the people that sit around that table are incredible. Wasn't there also talk of possibly a bricked area?
Yeah.
Where one of the challenges that the Historic Committee discussed was being careful that as they honor specific families or specific people, not to have anybody feel left out. Say your and I am no expert on the Gold Star program at all, but I wonder, Jim, if you could perhaps explain to the mayor the thoughts that the council, or excuse me, the committee shared about possibly in bricks or some way,
Yeah,
both as a fundraising element to pay for this, but also to figure out ways to honor as many people as possible. And because
I mean, the Gold Star families, there's not gonna be that many Gold Star families. I mean, this is a wife or husband with their kids that their spouse was killed in a foreign land, right? I mean, I guess it's not always foreign, but I'm guessing there's not enough. I would definitely not put Gold Star families on a brick. I would not walk on a Gold Star family. Just, I think that visual would be kind of odd, but I do know that Sandy, point is, I think there's a bunch of cities nearby. We could go look at a lot of really impactful examples. Jenny Taylor, who is the spouse of Brent Taylor, who was the mayor of North Ogden, is probably the biggest advocate for Gold Star families in the state. She is somebody, I'd be happy to reach out to her, that could come help at least advise on what a lot of folks are doing regarding Gold Star families, because I know they're very, very, very particular and sensitive.
Yeah.
And so I think having people from that community, because the rest of us can't relate to it, is pretty wise to have them at least advise on best practices.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. One of the things that's a little difficult, and one of the reasons we're looking at engaging the historic committee on this, is the Gold Star. It is very, you basically have to on one side put what they say you were putting on. So for example, we're controlling the entire monument versus them telling us, hey, you're putting this on, and then you can, maybe put some things on the other side. And so that's why we thought perhaps doing our own, but I still like the thought. And honestly, knowing the Taylor family, I promise you she'd be willing to consult.
100%.
Even if we weren't following their exact model. So I do
For
love
sure.
that thought.
Yeah.
And but honoring Gold Star families, I think, like Matt said, isn't going to be an exhaustive list. It would be very small.
Very small.
But
yeah.
it would be part of something that I thought would be really relevant and impactful. So,
Yeah.
so
I will take that feedback
Awesome.
back to the committee.
okay. Well, thank you.
Okay,
Any other questions, comments? Jim, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you.
for all you do. We love your committee.
all right.
So it's fascinating. Thanks for your work. Yeah.
Really cool.
Okay, item B, the Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan discussion. So this is an item that, if you remember, we discussed this in our retreat back in January. And Councilmember Burrell specifically had some items that she wanted to readdress, that we said we would open up, not the whole plan, but some items that we agreed on that we would look at. So what this is, bringing this back, Mike, maybe I'll let you give a better introduction to it than I just did. But yeah, this is the Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan.
That's actually a great introduction. I don't have anything else, but I have the plan. I can open up. I can answer questions the best I can, and
Okay.
I'll turn it right back.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's open it up and see what specifically we're talking about.
I have section 4.4 brought up because that was the note in the council retreat document. So that's what's on the screen, but it's also the entire plan, so we can jump anywhere.
Yep.
Do you happen to have also the pages before this that show diagrams within our Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan? Oh, good.
This is the whole plan. So yeah, I've got whatever you want to look at here. Do you want the cross section?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things that if I may begin, that sparked my desire in the January retreat to address particularly a singular sentence in the Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan, section 4.4. It's in the second paragraph. And here's the challenge. We do have this diagram. There's actually another diagram that shows as many as 2 private vehicular lanes with buses in outside shoulder lanes. So, one of the pieces of feedback that we got from the project manager who was prior to Josh Van Jura, his name is John Thomas, was that he said, look, you have a marvelous 159-page Wasatch Boulevard master plan, but when it comes to the Bengal Golden Hills corridor, I think you need to be more explicit on what you really want there, because we showed this, again, we showed one with even more lanes. And I think for the residents of District 4 that I was familiar with, there was about 800 of us that signed a petition. We really wanted this to be no more than 3 lanes across. But we were willing to look at the idea if these 2 outer, what are called shoulder lanes, were strictly and absolutely only used for express buses. But now if you go to section 4.4,
If I may quick, that wider cross section you're referring to was a concept for in front of the gravel pit, north of Fort Union Boulevard.
okay,
So that's separate, and then once you get south of Fort Union, it
it would
becomes,
be no wider.
it becomes
than
this as the
one.
preferred.
Right,
cross.
great, thank you, Mike, that's an excellent point. So if we look at this language, if you could go up just a little bit higher so that we can go
Oh,
to this
sure.
paragraph.
This one here,
So yeah, on this paragraph, thank you for
don't know
also
where we're at.
larger. It says, on Wasatch Boulevard, Little Cottonwood Canyon Road, south of Bengal Boulevard. The shoulder, so now we're talking about the 2 shoulder lanes that in the diagram showed an express bus and then showed a bicyclist. Would be open to all vehicles in peak hours, AM north, PM south, so those are commuters. And HOV, so the high occupancy transit on peak ski days. And the way that I can understand that sentence is basically to say that we would allow private vehicles during peak times on, 2 lanes going north, 2 lanes going south, which would then, in essence, induce demand. We would find that vehicles will go, hey, you can go zooming along in this corridor, through Cottonwood Heights. And soon it would have the feel of an arterial such as Highland Drive, except our 50 miles an hour. And I know that everyone at this table has supported our formal instruction to UDOT that we want a road redesign based on 35 miles an hour. They've never agreed to that. Now that the record of decision has come out on the EIS, we're of course very much working with UDOT, have high hopes that they'll go for a lower speed, but a challenge with road design is that if you design it wide lanes, numerous lanes that are wide where motorists can see out, they drive fast. That's the physical response. So one of the things that WFRC didn't really talk about, that at another meeting, I hope they do, is that part of this safe systems approach is to accept the premise. There's actually 5 premises of the safe systems approach. And one of the key ones is human vulnerability. Human vulnerability is not just that our physical body cannot withstand being knocked up against by a private vehicle going more than 18 miles an hour and not sustain serious injury. And they have it, it's very specific where the death level comes in and all this. We know that we can't have a state road going at 18 to 20 miles an hour, even though we know there's 11 intersecting streets and there's a lot of cyclists, a lot of pedestrians who would like to be there and like to cross, but they stay away because of the level of danger of motorists moving so fast. So since one of the premises of safe systems approach that the federal government is promoting is human vulnerability, not just that we're frail if we get hit by but even for motorists to motorists, when cars are striking each other, especially a T-bone at over 35 miles an hour, generally there's serious injury, if not fatality. So one of the things here that I'm hoping that the council will consider is that we need this less of a wide stance. We want to at least remove this sentence indicating that we would allow all private vehicles on all lanes, and for the council to consider that with the support of the U.S. Department of Transportation, we have a real opportunity to strive for a truly highly level of safety than we currently are able to offer our citizens. You know, obviously this is about Wasatch Boulevard, but this same opportunity, I think we can be thinking about on other, you know, places and other roadways. But I'm
So,
Mayor.
yeah, I was just gonna say in regards to this specific language, I actually would probably be okay changing it.
Well, can I make a point?
So
Please. Unfortunately, I don't see that addressing the concerns that you put out. Because if you're going to have a lane that's there, whether it's being used by private vehicles sometimes, but it's there for transit use, the road is the same width as it always is. So your other perception of driving does not change. It actually would go down if there was more people in there. So in that respect, I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? If you've got a HOV lane there, the road is the same width, whether or not you're currently using it that way or
yeah,
not.
but so the city of Provo has dedicated bus lanes that private cars cannot go in. And I get the vision of it, but when you take that out, you don't really, because I drive that area a lot. And I see it a little differently than what you're saying. So I know that the road's
You're talking
wider.
about the rapid transit form,
Yeah,
and well, that's a dedicated separated lane that is segregated from the rest of the roadway.
well, no, it's not. It's not. It's the inside lane of a 3-lane road. That's how it travels all through Provo. So what I think all Councilmember Burrell is saying is, and I don't have a problem with it, and maybe you do. So
If the perceived traveling width doesn't change, then the behaviors of the drivers are typically not going to change.
right, other than knowing that they can't get into that lane ever. If they do, it'll be, to me, I don't like the thought of it going in sometimes in peak hours and not other times. I think it'd be easier to just allow it for transit. But let's get some other thought. Councilmember.
Where is this exactly? Can you?
Yeah, could I add some context?
I need some visual.
Yeah, so we can go there, but just to step out, I don't think the suggestion is a bad one, and actually the plan does reflect that. When the data was gathered for this plan, it was I don't know if it was the 2040 plan or the 2050 plan from Wasatch Front Regional Council. That's where the traffic data comes from. That's where you typically get the data for all of these studies. And it was saying, hey, you know, something needs to be done on this roadway. And we were saying, okay, we don't want to just widen the road. So we have language in here, and it's all over the plan, but it is in section 4, which is specific to the objective of balanced livability, roadway capacity, and canyon access. But we do have lines in here about, you know, slower speeds, mechanism to prioritize high occupancy vehicles in transit, safer neighborhood street access, implementation of pathways, and restricting the overall pavement width. So I do just want to note those things were priorities when this was developed. And yeah, it does say, you know, the roadway could be open to all vehicles in peak hours, HOVs transit on peak ski days. And then in the future, the flex shoulders / additional capacity, they're interchangeable, could be used to create dedicated bus lanes, your BRT vision.
Right.
And then there are additional comments in here. This is balancing a lot of different things and trying to come up with a vision for it. To slow Wasatch Boulevard through posted speed and design of the roadway. And it does say there, slow Wasatch Boulevard is a key way to make the corridor safer. Improve neighborhood access. Consider roundabouts and other traffic calming measures. We lobbied UDOT really hard on that, and they didn't take it. Local street connectivity, on-street bike facilities, native landscaping, medians where feasible. You know, so we do have the language there to try to assist with some of these concerns of reducing speeds. So, you know, from a staff perspective, when we look at this cross section, I'll zoom way in here, the flex shoulder concept. You know, it's got a lot of words there, but it says, you know, open to vehicles in peak hour, open to HOVs on peak ski days, informal bike space, rest of the time, future consideration for BRT. That's a lot of ideas. You can't do all of those things. They just naturally conflict. But at the master plan level, I think the point was, hey, if we have to add capacity, let's do it in a way that tries to incentivize more people in fewer vehicles and try as much as possible to use the space for that. So taking into account all the other things of the design of the roadway is critical to the speed of the roadway and the landscaping, the shared use path and neighborhood access still being important in the plan. From a staff perspective, I think the ultimate vision here was to use that as a transit priority lane regardless. It's a very long way of me saying, I don't think it's an issue to remove open to vehicles in peak hours, because I think the intention of the plan was to work towards a future where that is a transit dedicated lane.
Okay.
Well, you know, what are the,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, may I just say one more thing? So, because I think that Councilman Holton made an excellent point. Can you show the Golden Hills Bengal corridor so that everyone has the benefit of understanding the 2.6 miles we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be helpful. But I also think that it's important that everybody at this table, this is the first time we've talked about Wasatch Boulevard since the record of decision came out a few weeks ago. And of course, we know that part of the record of decision is this Wasatch Boulevard section. And so when the record of decision came out, it says right in it that UDOT will implement enhanced busing and build mobility hubs to be used only before the gondola is completed. And it says that in phase 3, which is 2040 to 2050, that the you could put that back.
I'm going to put an aerial image. It's a little easier to see than that busy
That
map.
by 2040 to 2050, as they're building the gondola and getting that operable, they want to no longer have skiers arriving to the gondola on buses. It says that very clearly in their information, that all those who arrive to the 2,500 parking stall garage located only 0.7 miles from the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon would arrive in private vehicles, and there will be no more transit service. So I think that there are some contradictions and concerns that we as a city need to really, you know, try to work out with UDOT. Like, if we're doing this road widening to accommodate the potential for transit, then why is it that the 2 lanes going southbound, what they call a 2-lane imbalance, which is their first phasing in front of their 5-lane preference, the 2 lanes are going to the gondola, which is, of course, we all know, well south of the split in the road, the high T intersection, but still within the boundaries of Cottonwood Heights. So, you know, we're not going to work this all out, in my opinion, today at this table. I really appreciate that everyone's willing to take the time to look at the language. But we also know that since this language was adopted in July of 2019, UDOT has come out with iterations of its EIS for SR 210 that show that even though they tell us and they read how we want to preserve the character of this portion of Wasatch Boulevard, a gateway to both Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons, in their EIS, they show a highway in their rendering that is continuous highway type look, and their answer is also sound walls. So I think the council needs to think about how can we be saying that we want to preserve the character, we want landscape, preferably we need language that says landscaping in the medians, because we talk about landscaping, but we don't talk about land, to my knowledge, and please jump in, Mike, if I've overlooked that. But these are really important because this 2.6 miles is not only a place that we need to have be safe, but it's an aesthetic gem that, according to Utah, their answer is sound walls. So no longer is it the scenic experience that it is today, but we get sound walls.
Walls can't go up without the residents' approval.
Right.
So
but it tells us that they're planning on speed and noise.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that the mayor jumped in over a year ago and said, but wait a minute, if we have 35 miles an hour, we're not going to have nearly the sound of motorcycles and everybody else trying to rev up to 50 or 60 miles an hour. We know that Chief Russo did a check on speeds for a full 5-day period in May and recorded 2 vehicles traveling at 88 miles an hour.
So also recorded the vast majority of all the traffic at 50 miles an hour.
And 50 miles an hour where you have
Which
the
is-
intersecting streets is not
currently
safe.
the law and it's the posted speed limit.
So we have to
So-
decide in Cottonwood Heights whether we're going to do the bare minimum according to what is legally allowed, or whether we
So
are going to
let's-
really go to bat for our
Let's hear from
residents.
Councilmember Holden and do I want to get there.
Thank you.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I kind of go back to what we talked about a long time ago. We have these dedicated lanes. I always think about the freeway we have now on I-15 and those HOV lanes. People are gonna utilize them if they're there. So I see that's an issue if they're there and they're restricted in any way. And there's all the restrictions that Mike and so showed on there. I don't see how we can police those. Not us police those, but.
You know, it
Or
almost
keep
makes
it
you
chill.
think that you know, if someone says I can be on this lane and bike on this lane,
Yes.
but then you get someone else that's just.
That says I'm going, oh, there's a lane right there. I'm going.
So,
It's
so the
something we have about
the
that.
dedicated lanes that I drive, I mean, in Provo, because I drive that area a lot.
Yeah.
I've never one time in my life seen a car in that. It is, they let you know you can't be in.
And they've done a good job of that, but it's taking time, I know too. When
Yeah.
they first did that, I know they were having some of those issues.
Yeah.
I
But I'm
mean,
just-
we were literally just talking last time about needing 2 more additional officers for traffic
Yeah,
and not being able to actually meet the need that it does. You know, begs the question, could you enforce that?
Yeah.
One thing they've done
I
really well in
think it takes a
Provo
period of time.
is.
It's culturally
not
done
just-
in Provo.
It's not just a lane that you can get to. They haven't, they're,
It's actually.
it
blocked out by-
intersmiths with enough
Mhm.
medians and the bus stops break things up. So it's very clear that
That
this
makes
isn't,
a huge.
this isn't a straight shot,
Yeah.
which, I mean, if
So
you
the
do
que-
something
the
similar, that
question
makes
is,
sense.
Can we, is anyone against removing the language of passenger vehicles being able to use that lane?
I'm not against it at all. I just,
You know,
Make it
it
enforceable.
just gives us another arrow in our quiver to lobby UDOT
Yeah.
to do something that they didn't Provo to not allow that. to be.
With this map here, I'm seeing that you've got a median there with trees.
Yeah, we-
Beautiful green, well-watered trees. There's 2 sidewalks. And it looks like, are they all walking? There's a biker on there. It looks like. So. The option that we're talking about is that you would take the vehicles there, but bikes would be able to go in that flex shoulder
Yeah,
and on the sidewalk.
yes.
And the sidewalk is not sufficient enough to manage bicycle traffic on its own, that you need to
Well,
open up
probably
additional.
recreational
Yeah.
riders, people, that aren't the middle-aged men in Lycra.
They're
So the fast
they're in the
bicycle-
tights going up
So,
the
yeah,
canyon.
the fast men on bicycles are gonna be here, and even though these look identical, we anticipate this will be more like someone, going along on their little, So-
and their
so
little
this-
white
So
e-bike.
the men in Lycra are gonna be here, and don't forget, Matt, or Councilman Holden,
Matt's
this will be a 2-way, because this is a 10-foot, according to UDOT, now I'm talking what UDOT has in mind. What UDOT has in mind is this will be 10 feet wide, and it'll have traffic going both ways. In their plan thus far, they have nothing here. They don't even have a sidewalk. Their renderings show the shoulder ends with no sidewalk. And we can thank an organization called Save Not Paved, who has put a lot of pressure to get a sidewalk. We're starting to hear Josh Van Jura talk about a willingness to look at this 2.6 mile portion of the Bangor Golden Hills corridor to at least have partial some sidewalk so that everybody who lives west can get to a place that they could safely cross to use this larger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And with that expansion, us asking for it to be wider and adding those lanes, does that add any imminent domain scenarios or no?
There's a lot, it might, but there's a lot of,
I just am wondering if we're
Right, yeah,
advocating
yeah.
for imminent domain. That was
No,
just.
Well, I can tell you, 4 years ago, there were 6 houses that received 6 homeowners in the Golden Hills, actually in the area around where Kings Hill Drive comes out onto Wasatch Boulevard. So in the center of this area, there were 6 homeowners who received a postcard from the Utah Department of Transportation saying, we think we might take your house by eminent domain. Just thought we'd let you know. We'll let you know. And it made, I think KUE TV News featured one of the residents who received the postcard. He hired a lawyer. Anyways, I'm kind of digressing, but the point is that they have already taken one house by eminent domain on the east side where the curve is just south of Kings Hill.
Yeah.
Does that
Drive.
make
Wouldn't be
sense?
us, yeah, but UDOT.
Because if
in
we're
their
asking
plan-
for it, then we're saying go wider and
Well, no, so their approved redesign in the ROD includes the shoulder lanes. So whatever
Talking
is
about the bike
included in the
lanes.
ROD is actually, there is some eminent domain that UDOT would exercise.
And they already have taken one house, and whether they'll take any more is yet to be seen.
Sorry, go ahead, Chief, has some.
If you impose that restriction, would it still be available to queue snow traffic? During closures?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's an unanswered that's a great question.
Well, if you remove the wording, based on this wording on what we're proposing, you would not, or we would not want to allow for the snow traffic. That's why Chief brings up a good point. It could
That's
be,
the
could be
concern,
an issue.
yeah.
because that's a big deal.
I think the whole idea, as you can see, all these. The idea here is that the flex shoulders are flexible use. You use them as needed with the future goal that it's a transit lane, in a future where more people than not jump on a bus and take transit. The whole system works differently than it does today. You're not just adding capacity specifically for other single occupancy vehicles. It's for HOV or buses or, some other sort of more efficient transit. I think you could group, this is again, a high level master plan, and you work your way down towards implementation. Where does queue cars on snow delays is part of, that troubleshooting as you work your way down.
Yeah, so you're looking, we need to give direction on what to do. right?
Yeah, so
So did you guys come up with the thought?
It's a lot.
I mean, Chief just confused me even further.
The devil is always in the details, and that is in the planning, and this is a 30,000 foot document. I would probably still lean towards some flexibility in it. I mean, as we get down and we discuss exactly what's going to happen there and where it's going to happen and how it's going to be implemented, there's a lot of opportunity for input.
I'd love some further suggestions from the staff. I'll just how I wrap my mind around these things is I am all about us being smarter and wiser so that it is less of a headache and it's safer for us to be on these roads. I don't want any unintended consequences of we just made it a lot more difficult, because one of the biggest issues that we have in Utah, no matter what we do, there are certain cultural norms of the way that people behave. And for instance, I don't know if my wife's ever even been on a bus in her life. I mean, they walk and they bike, but buses is not a thing. That it's hard to know that. I'd love your suggestion.
Yeah, I think, again, 30,000 foot view, the idea here was, hey, some capacity needs to be added to implement the vision that more people get on buses and take transit on the Wasatch Boulevard corridor. Not only for ski traffic, but the idea of a transit mobility hub at the gravel pit kind of started in this master plan, and there's funding for that now through the state. But the vision there is, hey, that could not only be a canyon transit hub, that can be a transit hub that goes northbound, that goes, becomes a transit stop on the east side of the valley. I think the short term is it's a transit hub for canyon traffic. So from a staff perspective, we wouldn't maybe suggest or recommend eliminating that travel lane, which is not what we talked about, but keeping it broad enough that we're still sticking to our principle of, hey, if we have to add capacity, do it cautiously. Don't just do it to do it. We still want to incentivize and encourage reduced speeds through design, landscape medians, shared use path, all these other safety and mobility related goals, and leave enough flexibility in there that we can come up with creative solutions as they occur. Short of saying, yeah, just widen the road, add another lane in each direction, let's call it good. The intention and the emphasis is that shouldn't be just another lane. It should be a flexible use. And if we need to clarify and massage the language of what flexible use means, happy to do it.
Can we leave it at, let's look at massaging language and bring it back to us with that actual language? Can we do that? Is everybody okay with that direction? Okay, sorry, we're gonna move on because we still have 3 items to go and then we don't have, hopefully these aren't gonna take a long time anyway, but Mike, so the item C is the general plan outreach discussion. So let's just briefly go over what that.
Sure.
entails.
Yeah, this is just as we gear up for, this fall, our next round of kind of public outreach for the general plan process. Getting some suggestions from the council on what that should look like. I just have one slide to pull up. And, if we need to continue this conversation, we definitely can, because we're not quite ready to even start scheduling public input at this point. But I'll start on the right side, the right column for outreach ideas on the general plan. What's been done already? Just so the council's aware, we have done one citywide open house about a year ago in March. We've had a project website with online survey engagement tools that saw a lot of feedback through there. We have incorporated previous master plans and citywide Y2 analytics surveys and the responses in there into the recommendations we're forming. We've also done social media posts, offered staff office hours, things like that. Those are some tools of what's been done already. Something that has to be done, this isn't in here, but there is a formal public process that needs to happen, and that goes through the planning commission and the city council. That's part of any master plan, so that has to happen. And then there's this kind of middle ground of, I think there's been interest in, let's take this back out to the public, and before we're in the formal consideration process, get a little bit more input. Some ideas to consider were district-specific town hall meetings. We had talked several months ago about hiring a moderator, a professional moderator to come in and host those town hall meetings in the way that each council member saw fit. There was not consensus on that, so we pulled that contract. Hasn't been approved yet. So district town hall meetings, each of you could run a town hall meeting and focus on the topics you want to focus on. Hosted by you, hosted by a moderator. We're open to suggestions. We could do more citywide town hall meetings. We can do the same things we've done online, social media. You could look at topic specific meetings. Sometimes when you present the whole general plan, it's a little bit overwhelming. And sometimes it can be beneficial to say, hey, let's talk about, whatever topic. Let's talk about housing today. What are some housing suggestions that everyone has? And then we can do things, and this requires some sort of budgetary support from the city council of citywide mailers to advertise these input opportunities, making sure word is out to everybody that we're going through the general plan and what it is and how to be involved. We could also look at focus group meetings, meetings with city boards and commissions and businesses and things like that. So there's a lot of ways to get public input, and I think we just want a little bit of direction. It doesn't have to be definitive on which way we want to go with it. And there's some things here that are going to require more time and budget than others, but we do want to get input from everybody and incorporate that all as much as we can.
Can we do 30 seconds each just to go real quick? Some thoughts? Councilor Newell?
I'll start.
Good, great.
I like the idea of actually sending some information out because we tend to get the same folks at the town meetings, town hall meetings. And I want to see that full outreach, reach everyone. And then do a little guerrilla marketing, and then also have some of the town hall meetings to follow up on those announcements so that people could get greater detail. I think that would really add to making sure that all the residents know what's going on here in the city, and not just the few that are paying attention to the website or the journal or whatever. Making sure that it's dropped right in everybody's mailbox so they have an idea of what's happening, and maybe even have a calendar for them to say, these are the things to look out for that are coming down.
Yeah, good thoughts. Councilor Holt.
I'd love to get, you mentioned the various approaches. There's definitely more of a robust approach compared to others. Is there that big of a different financial cost to the two approaches or models? And if we're talking $100, not a big deal. If we're talking tens of thousands, I'd be curious.
The mailers are, that's a cost. You're paying for postage to get to every single resident in the city. So that's probably the most expensive from a budgetary standpoint. Then hosting meetings and participating in those, it's staff time, staff capital
So
that we have to account for. And if you wanted to go the moderator route, there's some cost to doing that as well.
Councilor Bracken.
Mailer to every address in the city is usually $8,000 or so, because you've got 11,000 addresses plus printing.
But you do it no matter what the
I mean,
event looks like possibly. Yeah.
but yeah, that's usually a bigger cost.
Yeah.
You could potentially do an insert into the newsletter as well.
And that's usually
And that would cover that cost,
Mm.
so.
If we did something like that, that would be a
Smart.
great place to put a calendar of events in there.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Doing
Even
an
though we
insert
do have
there
a
is probably the most economical.
But I think to your point, sorry, I would just say real quickly, giving them some information ahead of time so they don't, it's not just come to this event. There's at least something there that they can grasp to hopefully get some more interest in the event.
Yeah, Councilmember Brown.
Yes, well, I think the most cost-effective way, and it's not on this list, but I think that this is so important to our city that we should make an exception a couple of times, a couple of the months with our newsletter and have it smack dab on the front page of that newsletter. That newsletter is a full color, amazing piece that goes into every single mailbox throughout the city. And instead of our usual format of an opinion piece on the front page, I think really having it as soon as they come out of the mailbox, it's something very unique. It's something they haven't seen before. It's again right on the front page as opposed to an insert, which again, we know I used to sell direct mail advertising in my 20s. So I happen to know that when people take something out of their mailbox, they give it only a few seconds and it goes in the trash. And so maybe the more interested people of Cottonwood Heights see the front page and go, oh, another one of those, and then 50% read it. I don't know what the reading rate is. I don't know if we've ever done a survey on that, but
Usually about
definitely.
2/3 to 3/4.
How do you do a survey and finding out?
Yeah, we surveyed. Yeah.
So, but my point is, if it were on the front page and it really screamed right out, to me, that would be as effective as spending the $8,000 to do an envelope that comes and the envelope says important information and maybe they open it, maybe they don't, but we know they get the newsletters. And again, if it was, that would be my vote on the front page of the newsletter.
Yeah, newsletters, I think good thought. What about a committee?
Oh, I also just,
I mean,
what,
to engage staff specific to the general
Some
plan.
residents and business owners, kind of a mix. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
There was no lack of participation when we did the first one and getting people out. They were very excited to find out that it was going on. That's obviously abated some, because I mean, you're right. It definitely wasn't the same people that you always see. There was the consultants that did that were consistently shocked at the number of people. They had way too few resources at the first couple of meetings till they learned they needed a lot more. So if you can get the buzz out there, I think people will come in and respond to.
So just a thought, and then I'll shut up. When I worked out on the west side of Salt Lake County, there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of plans. The ones that I thought were most successful were the ones that were less rigid. And they were a little more welcoming to just let you come in. It's almost like an open house to let you come in as you would like, not super, you don't feel like you're gonna have to go there and raise your hand and fight over other people. You're able to come in, they had people, there were various posters that kind of focus on different parts of the plan. And then you had individuals, I don't know if it was staff or consultants that were at each little section, getting individual feedback as someone was casually, they're in their soccer uniform coming back from soccer practice with their kids, just sharing some insight. I don't really like that. I don't think that's a great approach. And they would mark all of these comments and this feedback down. And they did it over a couple weekends. Because one thing that I think a lot of residents don't want, they don't want to come to something that's very intimidating, something that's very rigid and going to put them on the spot and have their neighbors judge any question or comments that they might have. That's not super useful and not super inclusive. So I would be a proponent of trying something that is a little.
so I think
more
that's
casual,
actually a similar template to what we've done,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that's
Well,
kind of what we did the
The
well,
last,
in April last year, that was the whole city. I know it had I felt it was a popular thing when we discussed this back, I believe it was in late last year. And we talked about doing it district by district. And I really like that idea that it can be held in each district maybe with the kind of format that Councilman Bracken, where people can come, it's not as big as holding it singularly here in City Hall, which is what we did, of course, April a year ago. And where people can come district by district. I still think I'm in support of that mechanism.
Can I just add, so this will be the third community I've been involved with the general plan, and what I've seen work fairly well, and I know it's different for different communities, is kind of what's been explained, where you advertise, very importantly, by district or by area, and you can do that all in one shot with the newsletter. And then you have the open house format with staff per district and have those input processes kind of by areas. I've seen that work very well. That's probably been the most successful, as long as you get it out, like Councilmember Newell mentioned. And you could in a newsletter, as Councilmember Burrell stated, or some advertisement saying, here are the areas and the times when we'll be having it in different districts, and it'll be an open house format. I think those
that'd be
work
great.
great.
I think the thing that you probably do to generate specific people's interest is tell them kind of, I mean, if you say you want to see what your house, you know, how tall your neighbor can build their house today, questions like that, or, you know, you want to see what the future plan for your address or your neighbor is. This is the plan where we decide is across the street from you okay with the residential office, and what does that mean? Or is it okay with neighborhood commercial? I mean, we're going to be talking about that later in our business meeting, but if you start, because we know that people get interested when they get a notice from the planning commission saying there's a zone change up in your neighborhood. And this is the time to set the document which dictates what happens with those zone changes.
Well, I'd make a suggestion that I'd be supportive of what you mentioned.
So Mike, do you have some good direction?
I do. We'll come up with a plan. This will be a couple
I
months.
thought
out.
those were all really, really good
Send it
comments,
out.
by the way.
Yeah.
So thank you. So we're going to move to item D, which is the city initiated rezone on Fort Union and Wasatch Boulevard. You remember we talked about this. There's the easterly portion of Fort Union, almost abutting up to Wasatch. There are some businesses there. And it looks like we have the map up already that are interested, at least a couple of them anyway, they come to us whether or not the city would actually initiate the rezone. And so actually, I'm going to let Mike continue this discussion.
Yeah, yep. So it's these, I've highlighted them here. This is current zoning. This is the intersection. This is Canyon Center, the big purple mixed use project. We're talking the 7-Eleven, which is on the corner, the Lift House Ski Shop, Porcupine, and the Porcupine owned office building. So both of those, and then Alpha Coffee right across from Racket Club Drive. Today, they're all zoned. Well, most of them, 4 of the 5 are zoned regional commercial, just our typical commercial zone. Alpha Coffee and the building, the office space underneath is zoned neighborhood commercial. There was some interest and a request from representatives of Alpha Coffee and Porcupine to have the city consider a city initiated rezone rather than having them apply for a rezone, to come in and basically rezone all 5 of those properties to match the existing land use designation there, which would be mixed use. So the request would be to change the zoning from neighborhood commercial and regional commercial into mixed use for those 5 properties. I included existing land use because that is compatible with what the current general plan land use map already says today. So this would be just a zone change, not a general plan amendment, to bring those properties more in line with the general plan as it is today.
What's the reasoning?
One of the businesses wanted to do some work, and they're limited by the ordinance and in the expansion work they want to do.
They want to bring the building closer to the
So-
sidewalk.
Yeah,
If I can say specifically, so the Alpha Coffee is located approximately here, and they want to do a patio and press. So they want to expand their, in essence, their ability to host more people. in the
Setbacks to
business.
the right of ways would be one change, but I think something that makes sense, to be honest with you.
yeah, mixed use has flexibility in pushing buildings and uses towards the street, accommodating people, a little more flexibly than the neighborhood commercial zone. So that's the impetus for it, but then hearing Alpha, or not Alpha, but Porcupine also being supportive of it. Now we have 3 of the 5 properties in favor of it.
So I think it's important that we think holistically, we think about the residents that live within this area. Of course, we know that there's townhomes here, there's condos, there's all of Apple Valley. I've met with my constituents in this area just in the last month regarding the Canyon Center generally. And one of the things that they're really looking to us for leadership on is to really be thinking about mobility issues. And so if we talk about zoning, I think we should also be thinking about the flow. And some of the remedies that residents of this area, as they know there's going to be more and more patrons coming into this area in the years ahead. They've already asked, and they're hoping that Chris McCandless will follow through. I don't, and I.
Hey, Ellen, so I really don't want to interrupt. We are really limited. We have about
I know,
6
but
minutes.
what it is, there is real issues around the fact that cars park on the north side of Fort Union Boulevard. And I think if we're considering this zoning, and maybe we don't have time to do it today, but before we make any decision or certainly just say, wow, that's sounding really good, we need to really think about the safety issues of people jaywalking across where there's no crosswalks in this whole area. People are not going to come from the Apple Valley and the area, all the residential areas, and there's no sidewalk even here.
So Mayor, may I make a comment related to that? So what we need direction on, the rezone process does not necessarily address those types of issues unless you have an amendment to the wording in the zoning ordinance. We just need direction on whether you would require the property owners to initiate their own rezone and pay an application fee and move forward, or if you want it to be city initiated. The only way I feel comfortable with city initiated is if it's multiple properties, which this meets the criteria. So we need direction on whether you want us to proceed or
Did
not.
we engage the Lift House Stand or 7-Eleven?
We haven't yet.
Okay, so the 3 we have engaged are all in favor.
Yeah, from the meeting we had with them. Now, for them to initiate it, it's $1,000 fee that they could pool together and apply. It's not overly burdensome. So, they can apply even if
I
the
have something
council
to-
doesn't initiate it.
I mean, and I'll be honest, you go back to what the current zoning is, that actually this regional commercial, to me, honestly, it was a surprise. Because we took this zoning a long time back when this was rezoned. I actually assumed that was all mixed use. And we got the whole thing. So I've zero issue with that. I think that's a good move. I am a little more concerned with the differences between neighborhood commercial and mixed use. Mixed use is typically a little bit more intense use than neighborhood commercial, with it being right here. These houses are a little bit higher. Are they at the minimum setbacks for the back, and what's the maximum height in mixed use period?
That whole analysis starts when there's an application made. Whether it's initiated by the
Mixed use
city,
has a maximum or a condition.
35 feet, and they can request an additional story. That's a conditional.
Okay,
It's a plan.
So-
So the base height is the same as neighborhood commercial,
Right.
35 feet.
but neighborhood commercial doesn't have a conditional use for 50.
Correct. To go up higher.
Because again, when I do my analysis on zone changes, which this is, it's the current users may not always be there.
Mhm.
And what's the worst possible thing that could happen? Am I still okay with it?
So under mixed use, is there a scenario where we lose full commercial sales tax?
I don't know, but from what I
Under mixed use, you
just heard,
correct?
there's a chance where we get a 50-foot tall building there.
Mixed use has to have a mix of uses. It allows any commercial, it could be an office. You could replace a retail use with an office.
But it,
But
or
it could
with
be-
for residential.
Or with a mixed residential.
It
product.
could allow for some residential in there.
But it has to be-
Neighborhood commercial also does, regional commercial does not.
Neighborhood commercial requires,
It allows residential,
it allows residential, mixed use
But it couldn't be-
require
just 2 uses at least,
2 use.
doesn't matter what.
Would the extra level require legislative approval?
No, that's
No, planning commission.
But you're looking at that holistically, right?
Which is
That
what we're
purple
getting
zone,
into.
if it's mixed use, you could have purely residential there. Because the other area would satisfy the fact that there is a hotel and other uses of that land. I just don't want to create a scenario where that's the mouth of the canyon. There are very few opportunities that we have as a city to collect tourism dollars as you're going up the canyon as for sales tax. And I just don't want to create a scenario where all of a sudden we had a sales tax base there and it then went bye-bye. If that's not true, then I'm good with it.
Yeah, they couldn't use Canyon Center's mixed use to count towards their mixed use. They're different projects. Now they could scale back the use. They could have like the townhome projects across from Mountain View Park have live workspaces that satisfy the mixed use requirements
I
today.
just don't want them to band together and then it's like, oh, we found out that they were all selling to somebody for some other reason.
Sure.
Well, I continue to, I'm on the record that I am very concerned about encouraging higher commercial levels in this area unless we as a council are willing to really consider the mobility issue, the jaywalking that's going on, all the danger, all the additional cars, this has not been, there's been a lot of complaints of people that live around this area for the way this was approved. It's been a.
Sounds like we're not gonna be able to come to a consensus.
Well, maybe we need to table this for
Yeah.
2 weeks, but have we talked to these
homeowners, I think, these are the property owners that I would be, if they're okay with potential mixed use here. Then I'm okay, because anybody who moves in is gonna move in with the code the way it is. But that's where I would like to maybe hear.
We haven't talked to anyone. Typically, once the application is made, the notice goes out, the analysis begins, the conversations with the public begin. That happens as part of the
But
process.
the
Whether it's
zoning
city-
notice went out, none of the residents showed up.
No, we have not.
No,
noticed
There
anything.
hasn't been anything, there hasn't been an application.
We don't have
The discussion is do we want them to
All right,
apply or not?
I apologize. I'm thinking back to 3.094 acres that is on our agenda tonight.
Yeah, that's different.
Okay, so
Okay,
we're out
that's
of
a
time.
brain
We're
flush on my part.
we're gonna go to our last item, which is our police radio order discussion. So there's been, actually, Chief, aren't you, do you want us to talk about the further, Chief? Yeah, Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll do it very quickly.
Okay.
The statewide radio program that controls all the public safety radios throughout the state is changing the format. And without getting too technical on what that means, they don't just bring us into the new century and provide for abilities to encrypt and hit areas, rural areas where radio transmission was not available, build new towers. And just increase the technology. So that decision was made several years ago. It is due to go into effect, go active first quarter of 2024. To make that happen, our current radios that we bought 15 years ago, they're still functional, they still work well. We paid a lot of money for them, won't be inoperable. They won't work on the new system. That everyone in the state has the same problem. So we have to buy new radios. If you're in a very small rural area, the legislature has provided funding for you to do it. In major areas or larger cities or even medium-sized cities, there is no money available. We have to pay for them. And so what that's done is create a run on the radios. You can't get the radios. So we brokered a deal. We got to roll up. I came to you a while ago, if you remember, we had to rewind the budget and I ordered radios months ago. I got 8 radios today and they owe us a lot more. And we've had to carry that into the new budget year. I have a commitment from Motorola that if I order the radios now, I should be able to have them in 6 months. We go, now, can you see a turn, push the button really first quarter? Probably not. I don't think they are, but I'm not willing to gamble on it. That's a big gamble that our radios aren't going to be working. The cost is $174,000 to place this order. I was trying to do this incrementally through the years, and if I had money at the end of the budget year, buy 7 or 10 radios now, 10 radios next year, whatever, so that I would buy them and I wouldn't have to come to you and say, I need $174,000. That funding got moved, and the council time felt like, no, we should put that money back in the general fund, and when you need the money, just come ask for it. But then at the time, the radios were available if I bought them 7 or 10 at the time. That situation doesn't exist. fast forward today, here we are with a dilemma. We need the radios, there's no way around it. We want to place an order with Motorola. I have a bid from them. We have some of the radios. To complete the order is $174,000, and we have our fingers crossed that they'll get here in time. And
Maybe they'll be into the next budget year.
yeah, I don't.
Or do you have to pay for them now?
So we pay for them when we get them, but I have to do a PO now, and that's a lot of money. And I was hoping not to do this to, just do a surplus from previous years.
Yeah, and the fact that it's mandated by the state, we don't have a whole lot of choice. So I mean,
Okay,
it
so
has to be done.
any questions?
Yeah, so what we do is we do a budget amendment in September or October. Ours to include this, but we want to make sure you're comfortable with us moving forward with the PO.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
And just to note, we have 50,000 in this year's budget already, and then we would carry roughly 50 over from last year that we weren't able to spend. So that, we're only gonna be.
So we would only have to come up with 74.
Buying an extra 75 is a lot
Oh, okay.
easier
Yeah.
to.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah,
I'm just watching Sean because I don't want him to have an
It's committed.
No,
brain burst.
it's something that has to be done. That's
I know,
the critical part.
Oh,
Okay, it's actually 125. I know where we.
125, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, let's do it. Okay, item 5 is a review of calendars and upcoming events. August 12th, we have our Autism Council of Utah lunch with the COPS event from 11 to 1. Awesome event. Thanks, Chief Russo. August 14th is to meet the candidates, a really important. We need to meet the candidates from District 1 and District 2, August 14th from 6 to 8 here at City Hall. August 26th, 9:30 to noon, park in the park at Mountain View Park. August 31st, the community block party at City Hall from 5 to 8. And the Monster Mash is on the calendar the first time on October 27th from 5 to 7 at the Conwood Heights Recreation Center. We do not currently have anything to discuss in a closed meeting. So I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn our work session and convene our CDRA meeting immediately.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, everybody, any opposed? We're adjourned. Now we're just gonna wait.
Before we